this is not an event that we mess up or the slides didn't work so the day is shot. This is life. I mean, life happens like this, right? You know, you get, it just, so we deal with it and we move along. And so if this ruins your day, then we need to have a talk, okay? Seriously. We really, really do. You know, we've made so much out of 1 hour instead of making much out of Him. And anyway, I won't go there. But our other son is here today, Zach Farrell. You know, Zach and Nathan are best friends and have been like brothers for years and years. And Nathan and Amanda are getting married on the 13th of August. And so Zach and his wife came. That we had this big to-do last night. And so we had this big party. What? No, you weren't invited. I'm sorry. Janice goes, I missed it. So anyway, it's awesome to have Zach here. And speaking of wedding, I don't mean anything by this, but I'll be glad when it's done. This wedding, and I mean, the parents of the groom don't even have that much to do, and I'm exhausted from all the planning stuff, and everything is about the wedding. I mean, it's all about that 15 minutes for, it seems like it's been going on now for a year. Like, everything is about 15 minutes. I'm being facetious. I'm making a point because I'm going to show you something that's just mind-boggling to me. So here's where we're headed for the next season. I don't know how long, but I've just been digging around in the life of David, just in my own devotional life. And some of that is so good, I want to just share that with you over the next little bit. And again, I don't know how long that'll be. I mean, we're still in 1 Peter on Wednesday nights, and we've been going since I've been here. And what does that have? 5 chapters? So, I mean, it won't be that long. We spent 2 or 3 months on Nehemiah. So imagine what the life of David could be. But we won't stretch it out that far. So anyway, today is just kind of some introductory things to make up some ground of history. And so we're going to make that ground up today, and then starting next week, just really dive into Him. But to understand where we're going to start next week, I have to give you some background. Okay? Does that make sense? And if you'll pay attention, it's unbelievable. So if you have your Bible, we're going to begin today anyway in 1 Samuel. The Old Testament, you go through the first 5 books, which are called the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Then you go Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel. So it's, what is that, the 8th book of the Bible. So 1 Samuel. And I'm going to start in an unusual place. I'm going to start in chapter 2 with one verse, and then we're going to turn several chapters over. But this is why I brought up the whole wedding thing. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Now remember, we've looked at this, and I'm not going to go through it all again, but there was this woman named Hannah who was barren, remember? And her husband Elkanah, you know, she wanted a son, and he was a guy. I mean, he was a guy, guys. I mean, she had just been going, I want a son. And he makes this stupid comment. Isn't my love better for you than a son? Like, what are you thinking, dude? I mean, that you don't say that to a woman. So anyway, they pray, and she finally gets pregnant and has a baby, and his name is Samuel. And so she takes him, remember, she takes him to the temple, and Eli, remember I preached about Eli and his 2 sons. We did it on Father's Day. Remember how to fail as a father, about how Eli, the kind of dad Eli was. Well, so she's taking Samuel, this little boy, to leave him at the temple to grow up, because she made a promise and a vow to God, if you will give me a son, I will give him to you all the days of his life. And so she goes to deliver him, and as she does that, she's fixing to leave, and she prays this prayer, which is just phenomenal. It's one of the most gorgeous prayers in the Bible. And I want to show you a verse out of that. So look, let's start in verse 2 of chapter 2. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Okay, and then she keeps talking. Down in verse 6, the Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings from the grave and raises up. All this. Okay, and then verse 9. And He will guard the feet of His saints, but the wicked will be silenced in darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be shattered. He will thunder against them from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. And here it is. He will give strength to His king and exalt the horn of His anointed. What? He will give strength to His king and exalt the horn of His anointed. Here's what this is. It's a prophecy of King David, who would come about 100 years later. In this prayer, there's a sentence about what was to come in 100 years. Now listen. God was preparing and positioning and orchestrating people, men. He's putting things in order. He's behind the scenes putting all of the players into position so that 100 years later, Samuel, her son, could walk in with the horn of oil and anoint the King David. Do you get that? I mean, I don't know. You got to get that because it changes everything. It's like all of this wedding stuff. We're buying this and we're buying that, and we have to pick out ties, and we got these suits, and the shoes have to match, and we got to have this. Are we going to rent a tent? We're not going to rent a tent. What are we going to have? What's the menu? Blah 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 blah. All of that for 15 minutes. For 100 years, God begins to go, okay, I have a king. He's going to be a man after my heart. And out of this king will come my son, the King of Kings. For 100 years, God worked for that long. Isn't that amazing? Listen to me. There are things in your life that God has been working on and orchestrating and maneuvering and all of this for the purposes and plans He's got for you. Wow! God has been orchestrating things in my life, bringing people in, putting people here, giving me favor here, giving me wisdom here, anointing, all of these things for what He's doing in me. That's incredible. You got to get that. I got to get up and go to my job. I got to do. This is how we live. Listen, if you're living that way, you're missing it because for hundreds of years, God has been doing stuff just for you. Yeah. So live expectantly. Look. Be aware. Pay attention. Watch. Dream. Hope. Pray. Love, grasp, reach, hunger, thirst, all of those things. Become alive looking for the things of God. Yeah. How dare we live these cheesy, lame, boring lives, walking through, okay, I got to go to work, I got to watch TV, I'm going to play a little Nintendo. Not that anything's wrong with that, but listen, God has been up to something for you. Get in on it. Man, that just thrills me. I see this one little bitty verse and I've just come alive inside. Zach Farrell, God's got stuff for you. 1 Corinthians says, your eye has not seen, your ear has not heard, it hasn't even entered into your heart the things that God has planned for those that love Him. The rest of your life could be like a birthday where you're opening presents, gifts that God has given you going, oh, I've been waiting for this day. For 100 years I've been waiting for this day. Open it and see what I gave you. That's the way you live. Does that make sense? My face is flush. Golly, that's just thrilling to me. We don't let if our kids ever say these words at home, I'm bored. You know what they get? Work. Here you go. Here's the hoe, the shovel, the lawnmower, the weed eater, go get after it. And then after that, come back and see me and we'll, add some more stuff. And then we'll see if you're, listen, stop living life bored. If this is true, and it is, I've given my life to this because I believe it with every ounce of every fiber inside of me. This is true. If this is true, how dare I ever be bored? Because God has got something. Listen, God is up to something in you. I'm not trying to be Zig Ziglar. I'm telling you the truth. Start looking for it. Live like it. Live expectantly. God, I can't wait to see today. Today what you're going to do. Okay. Easy. Calm down. Hey, your life is crucial. Your life, my life is important. It's weighty. What God wants to do inside of you today will affect 1,000 generations. That's insane to me. God is writing a story, and all of us have this part to play. And He's been writing it for us and about this time that we have in it so that He can continue the story through me. I get to be a part of that. Man. So all of a sudden, my job is not just a job. Like, okay, God, what do you... we're going to get to see that in David. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he's a shepherd boy. He's in a stinky pen somewhere. And God goes, oh, I've got you right where I want you. Listen, God has you where He wants you. He's doing something. Don't curse where you are. Don't do it. Do not curse where you are. Because what happens the minute you curse where you are, all of your focus goes there. And then you lose the vision of what we have just talked about, where 100 years has been planning for 1 second when the oil dumped on his head. Wow. Okay. Hang on. We could offer an invitation right now. Isn't that good? Golly. When the Lord showed me that this week, I thought, oh man, okay. So Hannah was barren, or so she thought. She wasn't. She was pregnant for a long time. For years and years and years and years, she was pregnant and didn't even know it. And then the time came. Okay, what's this? And here he goes. So she was barren, or so she thought, and yet God had this story, and through her son, Samuel, through his birth, a king was coming. It's just awesome to me. Okay. All right. Now I've got cotton mouth, and my blood pressure's up, and I'm playing. Okay, chapter 8. Go to 1 Samuel chapter 8. We're not going to really dig into... Thank you, babe. Thanks. So here's what's going on. So the children of Israel begin to demand a king. Remember, now God had made a covenant. And in this covenant relationship, God says, I will take care of you. I will be your provider. I will be your protection. I will be all these things. You just love me. That's it. I am in a covenant relationship with you. You will always be mine. Well, then you come to chapter 8, and this has been going on a while, but Israel begins to cry for a king. We want a king. And it says in chapter 8, verses 19 and 20, here's basically, we're not going to go there, but the people were crying, we want a king over us. What's this? So that we can be like all the other nations. Woo! Boy, there's a sermon. How did that work out for y'all? Well, give us a king so we can be like everybody else. Those words, not good. I want to be like everybody else. Everybody else is doing it. Listen to me, high school kids. Everybody else is doing it. Wow, I think I'm tempted now to let you, since everybody else... Listen, if everybody else is doing it, chances are it's not very good. Okay. It's incredible what we will do and what we will forfeit to be like everybody else. Okay, then chapter 9, you start getting to see what they got. Okay? And at first, well, let it do itself for you. Look at chapter 9, verse 2. So start with verse 1. There's a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Becherath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. And he had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites. Whoa! Okay, hey, what do you mean? How's that working out for you? Look right here. This guy's impressive. He's handsome. He's without equal. He's tall, dark, and handsome. He's like the most likely to succeed out of Harpeth High School. You know, gets his name in the annual. Most likely to succeed. Saul. Okay, then down verse 5. They lost these donkeys. He was a donkey herder, basically, donkey cowboy. All right, and so some of the donkeys got lost. And when they reached the district of Zuph, in verse 5, Saul said to the servant who was with him, "Okay, let's go back, or my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us." Okay, so he's obedient. He wants to please his dad. He's handsome. He's impressive. He's obedient. He wants to please his dad. What's wrong with him? Well, let's keep going. Okay, verse 16. Verse 15. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. "About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him the leader over my people Israel. He will deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked upon my people, for their cry has reached me." Okay? So he was chosen by God. He's impressive, tall, dark, and handsome, obedient, loves his dad, wants to please his dad, and now he's handpicked by God. What else do you need? Let's keep going. Chapter 10, verse 9. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, I'm going to fill in all the blanks here, but I'm trying to paint you a picture of Saul. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed Saul's heart, and all of these signs were fulfilled that day. What more could you want? Things are looking pretty good so far. So far, so good. But tucked away in this awesome little story is a hinge verse. Okay, watch this. Chapter 10, verse 26. Saul also went to his home in Gibeah, accompanied by valiant men whose hearts God had touched. Okay, that sounds awesome. But some troublemakers said, "How can this fellow save us?" They despised him and brought him no gifts, but Saul kept silent. Watch this. The word for troublemaker is a word called Belial. Belial. It's troublemaker, wicked, and it's it turned into the New Testament word for Satan. Okay, you're going to see why that's important. So here's these troublemakers. I mean, everything's going fine. This is the man. And all of a sudden, here's what we see. Implied in verse 27, but Saul kept silent, is that he let it go down deep and he swallowed it. These people are going, "Well, you're not so awesome," and he bit on it. You mean they don't like me? Ooh, hear what's coming? Saul's weakness, as we are going to see today. And I challenge you to read this over and over and over. You're going to see it lived out. His weakness was that he was very concerned about what people thought about him. In fact, from this point on, he was addicted to approval. And I'm going to show you. He was an approval addict. When he was no longer who God made him, who he was no longer who God made him, but who people made him. And everything gets distorted and out of whack the more it's about you. In fact, in chapter 11, verses 12 and 13, then the people said to Samuel, "Who was it that asked, 'Shall Saul reign over us? Bring these men to us and we'll put them to death.'" And it keeps going there. The people there wanted the Belials to be put to death. They wanted the troublemakers to be put to death. And Saul so wanted to please this very few that he said, "No, don't put them to death." What? Are you kidding me? I mean, he's that much of an addict. The very thing that got him in this place. No. Don't kill him. Okay. So here's the deal. Belial, capital B, New Testament Belial, continues to deceive people today. Even many Christians, many believers, many of us in this church, into believing that the basis of our worth is our performance and other people's opinions of us. So here's what I want to do. I want to take a close look at Saul's life, show you about this whole approval thing, and see what the results were. Okay? You with me? So we believe that we must be approved by certain people to feel good about ourselves and enter the fear of rejection, causing us to conform all of our attitudes and actions to everybody else's expectations. Okay? So here we go. When we are addicted to approval, when what people think of us is more important than what God says, here's what it looks like. The first way it looks is that conviction, purpose, and power give way to fear, and so we hide. This is fascinating. Chapter 10, starting in verse 10. Chapter 10, verse 10. When they arrived at Gibeah, okay, remember in verse 9 we showed you God changed his heart. So they're leaving. When they arrive at Gibeah, a procession of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came upon him, Saul. He wasn't a prophet, but the Holy Spirit comes on him and he begins to prophesy. He joins in their prophesying. And when all those who had formerly known him saw him prophesying, they go, "What is this? What's happened to the son of Kish? Hey, look! Saul now thinks he's a prophet? Whoa! Look at what's going on." A man who lived there said, "And who is their father?" So it became a saying. Now they're talking about him. They're making these sayings up. How does that work out with an approval addict? Ooh. He hears these men talking about him, and so he stops prophesying. Wow. Verse 16. Saul replied, Now Saul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where have you been?" "Looking for donkeys, but when we saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel." Saul's uncle goes, "Tell me what Samuel said to you." Because he knew Samuel is a prophet. "What did Samuel say to you?" Now remember, Samuel's the one, Samuel had told Saul, "God has chosen you to be king." All right? I mean, Saul's carrying this thing around. I'm the king. I am going to be anointed as the king. And so the uncle goes, "Well, what did Samuel say to you?" "He assured us that the donkeys had been found." This is interesting. But he did not tell his uncle what Samuel said about the kingship. Why? He's hiding. Okay, no, don't tell him. I can't say that. Okay? Samuel summoned the people of Israel to the Lord at Mizpah and said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of Egypt, and I delivered you from the power of Egypt and all the kingdoms that oppressed you. But you have now rejected your God, who saves you out of your calamities and distresses, and you have said, 'No, set a king over us.' So now present yourselves before the Lord, your tribes and your clans." And when Samuel brought out all the tribes of Israel near, the tribe of Benjamin was chosen. Don't tune me out, okay? Then he brought forward the tribe of Benjamin, clan by clan, and Matri's clan was chosen. And finally Saul, the son of Kish, was chosen. What? But when they looked for him, he was not to be found. So they inquired further of the Lord, has the man come here yet? And the Lord said, "Yeah, he's hidden himself among the baggage." What? Here's the king of Israel. He's hiding because somebody doesn't like him. Somebody's saying stuff about him. And he's so addicted to what people want that he's hiding. Okay. We do too. We hide. This is a whole other sermon one day. But you and I hide in our baggage. Okay, I'll just leave that one. You can preach that to yourself. All right. So here's what's happened. This is that point one, that conviction, purpose, power, that gives way to fear, and so we hide. We talked about these three things. He hears men talking about him, so he stops prophesying. He's talking about donkeys instead of kingship, and we hide in our baggage. And then the last thing that goes with that one is chapter 13. Watch this. Watch this thing acted out, okay? This is sometime later, but I want you to see this. Chapter 13, verse 6. So several things have gone on here. There's been fighting, there's been all this stuff. So this is quite a while later, all right? And let's go back to verse 5. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Bethaven. Okay, man, there's this battle. Hear all these men. I mean, Saul's the king. He's impressive. Remember, he's a foot taller than everybody, and he's the most likely to succeed in Kingston Springs, and he's got all. Surely they're going to go get him, right? He's that kind of a leader, right? I don't think so. I wish he were. Watch this, verse 6. And when the men of Israel saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard-pressed, what'd they do? They hid. Now it's not just one hiding. He's got them all hiding. The addiction has been passed on to the family. And they're hiding in caves and thickets, among rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some of the Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. And Saul remained. Well, where was Saul? He's so impressive. He remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. Wow. Number 2, when we're addicted to approval, when what people think about us is like the most important thing, the second thing is we are easily manipulated, and we perform in ways we were not to perform. Chapter 13, verses 8 and 9. And so he waited 7 days. What I left out is a verse that Samuel specifically said to him. You wait right here for 7 days. Don't do anything. For 7 days you wait for me. Okay? So he waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. And so he said, now he's a king, he's not a priest. Okay, remember that. And a king doesn't get to do what a priest does. And so his men begin to scatter. So now he's scrambling, all right? And he goes, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. Uh-oh. God doesn't play with that, right? He's in an arena. Remember, 2 men dropped dead because remember when the Ark of the Covenant was going on a cart and it hit a rock and kind of tipped, and 2 men reached up to make sure it didn't fall, and that God killed them on the spot. You just don't mess with holy stuff, okay? And so here's Saul. He goes, give me the offerings, and Saul offered up the burnt offering. And just as he was finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. Okay, don't read ahead right there. We're going to get to that in a minute. Saul was a king, not a priest. He was not to do what he was doing. Okay? But when it's so important how we look to people, we get manipulated and we get in doing things that we shouldn't be doing because it's so important to us that we are liked and are thought of and or whatever. Okay, number 3. The third thing when we're addicted, when people think of us, what people think of us is more important than what God says. Go back to there. Verse 11. What have you done? Asked Samuel. And Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattering, and when you didn't come when you told me you would, hear him blaming, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, oh, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, so I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. Samuel said, you have acted foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. If you had, He would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. He was blaming. We throw people who we really, really need. I mean, Saul really, really, really needed Samuel. But when we get this addiction of approval about what people think about us, here's what happens. We throw people that we really, really need under the bus for those that we don't need. All this was about the Belials, the troublemakers, the ones that really didn't matter. And you know what? The truth is, the people in my life that when I get in these situations, when I think I've got to please somebody, they don't really matter either. We just don't want to admit that. And so we throw the people who do matter under the bus. Man, I could really meddle right here. Men, some of us have thrown our families, our whole families, under the bus so that we look like we're something to Joe Blow over here. Because I got to be somebody. And you're sacrificing the most important things in your life for how you look. How I look. Okay. Same chapter. Okay, you acted foolishly. So Samuel, verse 15. So Samuel leaves Gilgal and he goes up to Gibeah in Benjamin, and Saul starts counting the men who were with him. All of a sudden, we've gone from the king of Israel, and God has said, I will fight on your behalf. You belong to me. This nation is mine. I mean, the God, Jehovah God, that's who they had. That's who their dependence was on. And now the leader's going, okay, am I going to have enough men to fight the fight? You could have. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so we start counting. Number 5. When we're addicted to approval, when what people think is more important than what God says, we take care of ourselves and protect ourselves. Chapter 13, verse 22. So this fight is coming. What's this? And on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or spear in his hand, except Saul and his son Jonathan. Whoa, okay, I'm going to protect myself. I got to take care of me. I mean, when we get addicted to approval, we just so focus on ourselves. It's like, okay, y'all, you're on your own. I've got to take care of me. Isn't that sick? We're sick when we get to this place where what people think is more important than God. Okay? Number 6. Let's go to chapter 14. One day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man bearing his armor, "Come, let's go to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he didn't tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, and with him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah. Now listen carefully, see if some of this makes sense. Who was wearing an ephod. Okay, who gets to wear those? Priests. Okay, so here's this guy, Ahijah, wearing an ephod. He was the son, let's see if you hear these names, he was the son of Ichabod. Remember what Ichabod means? The glory has left. Remember, we talked about that a few weeks ago. I mean, he's hanging out with some cool guys. I mean, he's hanging out with Ichabod's brother, Ahitub, who was the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli. Remember that name from Father's Day? Phinehas? You know, he's the one sleeping with the women who've come to worship at the temple, and he's stealing the meat. Remember that they're supposed to bring sacrifice, and they're getting fat and all of this stuff. Awesome guys here, Saul! Woo! Man, you surrounded yourselves with some winners. We sit under pomegranate trees with posers and has-beens. That's over. The glory's gone. There has-beens. But it's so important that we look good and whatever. It's like, okay. Here's my picture of this. Y'all won't understand this. This is a Texas thing. And I'm really stretching this. But it's like, in Texas, high school football is like it. I mean, that Friday Night Lights thing that you might have seen on TV, that's the real deal. I grew up 40 miles from there. I mean, it's like, this high school stadium seats 35,000 people. It's as big as Vanderbilt Stadium. It's unbelievable. But here's the deal. After they've all played and stuff, now it's at the coffee shop, and there's guys wearing their leather jackets. A leather jacket is like these leather things. It's got the letter on it, and it's got whatever sport you lettered in. It's got patches, all district, whatever. And the deal is like how many patches you can get. And you got, all district, all regional, all state, UIL, band, swim team, and then you got to go to the back. It's like these coats, and they're like this thick. They look like George Costanza's coat because there are all these patches sewn on them, so that people go, wow. And so these guys are sitting around in their leather jackets, going, yeah, I remember that game, Nate. Yeah, man, I remember that game. I threw you that pass. And it's like, are you kidding? Seriously? Is it really that big? That's the kind of picture. They're sitting under this tree with these has-beens. The glory's already gone, and Saul's like going, yeah, man, I'm glad y'all like me. Hey, how about that time? These good old boys. You got a kingdom to run. And you're sitting around under the tree in your leather jacket, shooting the bull with these awesome guys. Do you get the picture? Now, okay, hear this in light of how we started. For 100 years, God's been orchestrating stuff for 5 seconds. But you and I, sometimes we're like this, sitting around under the pomegranate trees, just, shooting the breeze with the posers, the has-beens, the pretenders. See, here's what happens when you get to this place. When what people think is so important, here's what happens. You lose your fight. You lose your edge. You lose your vision. So you can sit around in your leather jacket talking about how much better you were than you really were.